Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. What are the Lakers going to do with Darvin Ham, and what exactly does a postmortem mean? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. No matter how or where you get your podcasts, it's always free and never behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 24,000 subscribers to the channel, all of whom, Andy, are wondering what comes next for a Lakers team that played hard against the Denver Nuggets, but once again fell well short of actually winning the series. I think some of them, Andy, are even blaming the theme song, the new theme song for the show. And I would like to remind people that the old theme song got swept by the Nuggets last year. The new theme song won a game. So
right. But the old theme song got further in the playoffs. So it really depends on how you look at this.
Right.
Like on one hand, they took a game off Denver and they lost by a combined 2 fewer points. But they went further in the playoffs, and the new theme song featured getting Russ off the roster. So there are a lot of really good things that happened during that era.
The scales of justice do seem currently weighted towards the old theme song. I'm not
now that
lie.
I think about it, the old theme song may have also been there when they added Russ. So
I think it was.
Sure.
I think you're right.
I'm not sure now.
But Andy, as we enter the off season, we ask two vital questions. What of art? What of music? I kid. Locked On Lakers on. Do want to let everybody know that Locked On Lakers today is brought to you by FanDuel. Today, make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Obviously, the summer of LeBron is going to begin and continue for, at least certainly a few weeks, to say the least. And we have a couple more things that we want to talk about in terms of, kind of finishing out this series, observations that we think are important, both for understanding what happened and potentially, what the Lakers do about it. But it's fair to say, Andy, that the dominant conversation on Lakers social media following this loss is Darvin Ham, even more than the LeBron stuff. I think people feel like we'll either get to it or really where is he going. But the Darvin Ham thing and what the Lakers are going to do with Darvin Ham, 100% top of mind for Lakers fans.
There are a lot of people hitting us up on Twitter at Cam Brothers or in the comments section of the YouTube channel. We do not know when exactly the Darvin is going to be fired, assuming he is going to get effing fired, although we suspect he will be getting effing fired. But either way, we do not know the exact date, time, hour that he will be getting effing fired. So if your question is, when is he getting effing fired? Slow down. We don't actually know. But there is a lot swirling in the air, like just the idea that, you're seeing reports from The Athletic, you're seeing reports from ESPN, you're not hearing a lot coming out that would be countering it. And they're just from the people who cover this team, the people that we know, stuff like that, our own observations, there just seems to be this general expectation that this will be happening soon. Perhaps there's a lifeline extended, but for the time being, I'm not expecting it.
So The Athletic, as part of their reporting, talked about the Lakers are going to, it sounds like, be not hyper deliberate, but somewhat deliberate and perform a post-mortem on this season and the work that Darvin Ham did. And we talked about it a little bit in yesterday's show. Like, why do we need this? Like, should you need the offseason at this point? Should you need days into the offseason to have an evaluation of what you think Darvin Ham is doing and your potential to move forward with him? And I had some thoughts about that, and I overnight thought about it a little bit more, and I want to get to that in a second, like why I actually think, what about the postmortem the Lakers actually do need to perform, because there's an aspect of it that I think is really important. But I think, if you look, there were two things that had really gone around and were causing a lot of chatter, not just on Lakers social media, just NBA, in NBA circles, both about Darvin, in terms of stuff that was reported in Dave McMenamin's postmortem on the season. By the way, everybody had these pre-written. Like the Athletic story, the ESPN story. Not a lot of faith in the Lakers to pull this series out, because similar to an obituary for a star that's like 92 years old, you're not really sure they're even still alive. You have that baby pre-written, years ahead of time. Everybody seemed to have the Lakers obituary written before the series started.
Particularly once you get down 3-0, your editors are giving you a call.
Right. Is that have you gone through that and updated it with any recent quotes? So Darvin, after the game, was asked about, because remember, the Lakers did their exit interviews following the game.
That never happens, by the way. That is highly unusual.
The Lakers never afraid to innovate, I think, in that way. So one of the things that got people's attention was he was asked about the Lakers and the keys moving forward. And, one of the quotes about injuries that he gave: stay healthy. You take a lot of flack for your rotations and all that. Rotations are secondary. The primary is health. So that ticked people off, because he is passing the buck, Andy, I think it's fair to say, to blaming injuries for some of the problems and things like that, not taking a whole lot of accountability. The next quote that really got people's attention, this is from Dave McMenamin's piece, which was reported out before the end of the series. This was not a quote from post Game 5, I don't believe. It's been extremely challenging, talking about the criticisms and the issues that have come around with injuries and the rotation, all that. Everyone's been in and out of the lineup, being criticized for not having a consistent rotation when I don't have consistent, healthy bodies. The thing that frustrates me, and I love this job, I love the pressure that comes with it, I've always been calm in the midst of chaos, but common sense tends to go out the window when you talk about my job in particular. It's amazing, and this is the part really people will pay attention to. It's amazing how people just skip over that core part of having consistency with your lineup is all predicated on health and performance. If you're coaching a team and one of your starters is like 10 games in a row just bleeping the bed, what are you going to do? That sound, Andy, in that last quote, if it were subtitled, it would have a beep, 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 because that's the sound of backing the truck up over your players. I mean, you might as well have said, if Austin Reaves sucks at the beginning of the season, what am I supposed to do? And by the way, valid question, like, do you leave guys in? When do you make a move and all that? Rui Hachimura, if he just sucks, what am I supposed to do? D'Angelo, if he sucks, what am I supposed to do? What you don't hear in any of this is any sense of, yeah, we had some injury problems, but I have to do better. We could have done, added consistency to the lineup. There were things I should have done faster or whatever, even if you didn't believe it. None of that is in there. None of it.
First of all, those quotes from Darvin, what they really demonstrate beyond the lack of accountability that I think is just as alarming, I would think, for the front office as they, I guess, inch towards their final decision. That reveals Darvin listening to the outside noise a lot. Mm-hmm. Like, that is him directly responding like a guy who's gone the Kevin Durant burner route on Twitter and is just searching for his own name and is fighting with eggs at 3 a.m. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's somebody that is hyper aware of what's being said, to the point where you're starting to get into super specific stuff where, I mean, like, at some point, if this is a direct quote to Dave McMenamin, Dave's got to be thinking, sir, this is a Wendy's. Like, this is way, way more than I need you. It reminds me of that one time years ago, before we go, but it's apropos because it was a Lakers series against Denver, 2009, when the Lakers took out Denver in the Western Conference Finals en route to the first of the 2 Kobe Powell championships. George Karl was doing like a shoot around, and somebody asked him a question. I was there, and I remember I was jaw dropped. But somebody asked George Karl a question about the difference between this year's team that had subbed out essentially Chauncey Billups for Allen Iverson versus the year before. And George Karl starts going on and on about how AI's taking the younger guys out, and it's just sort of like an influence. They're all out, at the clubs or whatever, like 3 a.m. We can't. I'm like, bro, you don't have to be. Right. You don't need to be telling these stories with like Iverson's name and like J.R. Smith's name, and like you can just say there's a bit more professionalism and maturity this year, and let people fill in the blanks for themselves. I was like, whoa.
This though, it gets to two things. The when you do your postmortem, you have to figure out like what are we doing here and why. And this issue in terms of the accountability question and these shots back at players without taking that accountability yourself is particularly important when it comes to Darvin. We'll explain why next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by DoorDash. Mother's Day is coming, and it's important to make your mother or the mother of your children a mother figure in your life. You want to make her smile. Moms are a gift, and therefore they deserve gifts. And how about some flowers or another surprise delivered the very same day with DoorDash? You can surprise her with anything from roses or chocolates or fashion that she's into. Or, is my advice, don't try for clever points at all. Cut out the guesswork and just ask her, what do you want? And then order it, because it'll be really easy and you'll make her happy. But no matter what is your strategy, all of these gifts can arrive at the door via DoorDash. Shop with savings that would make mom or the mother figure in your life proud. With a DoorDash membership, you'll save with a $0 delivery fee and reduced service fees on eligible items from DoorDash merchants that meet the minimum subtotal. Other fees, including service fee, apply. Terms apply. Get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 plus on your next flour, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply.
Locked On Lakers also brought to you by FanDuel. There are certain times of the year, Andy, the spring is one and the fall is the other, where sports are just awesome because they're kind of all being played at the same time. And you can engage in so many different things. And right now it is winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. And again, with any winning $5 bet. Like that's a pretty good math thing right there. Neither one of us are geniuses, but it makes sense to me. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. Again, FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when the Lakers were coached by Phil Jackson, Andy, I am not going to say here and say that Phil doesn't know X's and O's. He doesn't have it, but the triangle was a Tex Winter thing. And Phil's reputation was not one of being a chalkboard genius, a whiteboard genius. His gift was player management and getting these, the dynamics of very difficult groups to work together for great success.
Player manipulation sometimes, to be totally honest.
Management and manipulation, often a lot of overlap in that Venn diagram. There's no question.
Media manipulation as well.
All of it. Just like the management skills of coaching was really where Phil excelled. And Darvin surely isn't Phil Jackson, but his strength, certainly in his first year, was built around player relationships and getting buy-in and all these other things, and not necessarily the X's and O's. I'm not saying he's bad at it, but that part of it is his bread and butter. And so the issue that comes up with these moments where he seems to be arguing with Anthony Davis in the playoffs. When he says, if guys suck for 10 games in a row, what am I supposed to do? Basically, again, it's like there are only 3 guys that were removed from the starting lineup this year, meaningfully. You're not really anonymizing that quote very well. So this stuff is counter to what his strengths are supposed to be in terms of buy-in and relationships and all that kind of stuff. So if he's not getting that right, he's not good enough at the other stuff to make up for it.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, when you and I were talking about topics before the show, and like the idea of Darvin seeming more like a player's coach with a pulse of the room last year, but not this year. I imagine he did a legitimately better job last year, but I also wonder too, like if some of that success was a byproduct of LeBron and AD, whose opinions matter the most, recognizing that Darvin wasn't just a first-time head coach, so there's a certain amount of grace you got to afford him, but also the biggest obstacle for him was Russ. We're all being honest about this. And forget the idea that it's not Darvin's fault that Russ is on the roster. To some degree, it was actually LeBron and AD's fault, like their fault that Darvin was dealing with Russ. So like to whatever degree they were willing to take the L themselves, like from an accountability standpoint, even privately, that this was the roster situation, that may have afforded Darvin some degree of slack.
Maybe.
But this year around, like there's no longer an excuse there. He had, even with whatever caveats he wanted to offer, and some may be legitimate, he had a better roster and a better opening opportunity with training camp. He's supposed to be growing as a coach and didn't. But then also too, like with the idea of using these injuries as an excuse, and I think often tossing players under the bus in that process, it's not just that Darvin made some decisions that didn't work, because all coaches do that over the course of a season. It's that he was making decisions that the most important players on the roster, LeBron, AD, D'Lo, Reaves, Rui, I think Vanderbilt, once he, those periods he was available, these were the opposite of the choices that they wanted him to make. And these were, to be totally honest, the most obvious choices to make. So Darvin's going against the grain with this stuff. And that is his right as the head coach. But if you're going to do that, you better be right. Because if you're not right and you avoid accountability because you were zigging while everyone is yelling, zag, zag, like that makes all of this even worse.
Yeah.
And that's how you lose a locker room, because there was a certain amount of playing the game that Darvin seemed extremely resistant towards doing. And I think that is a big, big reason that he is, I think, likely to lose his job.
And it's like there's this sort of reluctance to accept that multiple things can be true at once, that he is correct. Injury, all these people, AD was healthy and LeBron was healthy. It's like, yes, like their top 4 players were healthy for most of the season. Like Reaves did Reaves miss a game? I don't think he did. Like those guys were healthy. But the rest of the roster, the supporting infrastructure for the Lakers was a train wreck, and with big long-term injuries, and say what you want about Gabe Vincent, they were depending on him to do important things on this roster. They depended on Jared Vanderbilt to do important things on this roster. Missing those 2 guys was really impactful. Rui was hurt and ineffective for a lot of the season. Some of that had to do with Darvin, some of it not. You can be correct that the injuries were a problem. You can be correct that, Austin Reaves was really struggling and we needed to do something because our start was being wrecked by this. And like, it's revisionist history for people to look back and say that like Darvin was just willy-nilly benching Reaves and all this. First of all, Reaves was terrible. Second, it did actually seem to help him, and it helped the team. The team started playing better. But then, but does that mean the D'Lo thing is a good idea? Does that mean the Rui thing is a good idea? And it's just like these collective, like when you take it all collectively,
the unwillingness to choose between Dinwiddie and Vincent.
There's
like
just this, right? There's this. What was clearly not happening was an understanding from the players to the coaching staff about why. It's like, you don't have to agree with me. I am the head coach. Phil Jackson benched Lamar Odom, and Lamar freaked out. We were at practice that day, said Phil had lost his rabbit mind. And then he won a 6th Man of the Year award. And Phil explained to us why he was doing it, and he explained to Lamar why he was doing it. And Lamar didn't like it, but eventually got used to it, and they were winning. That element between of here's what we're doing and why, all the reporting from people inside was constantly, we don't know why this isn't a thing. We don't know why we're not trying X, Y, and Z. We don't know why this lineup isn't part of it. And that is just a massive problem, because it indicates defensiveness on the part of the head coach. For a guy who, said in that quote that I read in the first segment, loves the pressure, stays even keel, and this and that and whatever. But apparently, again, the class management skills just weren't there this year.
And honestly, it's surprising, at least in terms of the evolution of where Darvin began to where he is now, and his basically universal reputation. And for what it's worth, the time that you and I, were around him at least some when he was an assistant under Mike Brown. And, we had a few side conversations, stuff like that. Like that type of confidence that was exuded and that you always heard about. Like Darvin had, heading into the Lakers hiring him, a phenomenal reputation around the league. Like he was seen as one of those guys that deserves his shot at a head coaching gig because he's put in the time and he has the respect and he's earned it. And it is in a lot of ways perplexing to see him regress the way that he did this year for some of the reasons that he regressed.
When the Lakers talk about this postmortem, because I think we both agree Darvin should be fired. Like this is not a tenable situation.
That's the thing. I think we've reached the point where no matter what you think of him as a coach, unless there's some type of mediation session led by Rob Pelinka with Darvin and the players who matter, I just don't think it's tenable, regardless of what you think of Darvin as a coach.
Let me run by what the postmortem might uncover that actually could favor Darvin, and you tell me what you think. We'll do that next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Monopoly Go, and certain circumstances, context, I can be super competitive. I get really competitive when I play poker. I can get weirdly competitive at times, like doing something random, playing pickleball with friends. I check the rankings of this podcast against others in the field, and we do very well. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. And thank you very much. My competitive side is a big fan.
You're welcome. I'm doing excellent work. Or is that not what you meant?
Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a twist on Monopoly where you play not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part, you get to mess with your friends. You get to be competitive with them, charge them rent on iconic properties, but rob them of their money like a reverse Robin Hood. And these leaderboards, they let you know who is the biggest Monopoly tycoon, me. So get in the game, join your friends, download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play.
So I think I mentioned for Tuesday's show, it would be a dereliction of duty on the part of the Lakers, and I wouldn't put it past them. But I think by now, you've had 2 seasons. You watched this entire year go by. You know whether or not Darvin did a good job or not. You should not have to go back and, check game logs and all these other things and statistics and review the film and all that. You should have an idea of whether or not you think Darvin did a good job, bad job, had the pulse of the team, didn't have the pulse of the team, played his players appropriately and not. I actually don't think that's what the postmortem is about. Here's what I do think it's about. If you look at who is available, should the Lakers fire Darvin Ham, it is a thin list of guys, particularly if you are looking at veteran head coaches, guys who have had the job before. It's Terry Stotts. You see Kenny Atkinson, and I think the big name that you would see is Mike Budenholzer.
That is a tricky sell. You didn't like Darvin Ham? Let's bring in the guy that Darvin learned from more than anybody else. And go.
Darvin's overstudy as opposed to his understudy.
Like, I mean, that is tricky.
I mean, you could just say it's better, maybe better Darvin. I don't know. But, I mean, they did fire him in Milwaukee, but coaches get point being. It's
it's become pretty clear Milwaukee's not great at figuring out what the hell they want from a coach either.
No.
So that might be points in Bud's favor.
It is. And so, like, if your goal is to hire a coach with some experience, because the Lakers have gone the first-time head coach now, 2 out of the last 3 hires, and burned through it relatively quickly, assuming they fired Darvin. I don't know if they want to hire, Adelman or Jordy Fernandez has already been hired, or some other assistants and all these other things. Phil Handy. I don't know if they want to go in that direction.
JJ Redick. Bringing in the rare podcasting coach player, which I got to admit, I'm kind of here for.
I would love it because, then the post games could just be the podcast. It's content.
And it's a great. I'm torn between wanting to see what that does to the podcast and fear that it could end the podcast because it's a really good podcast.
It's a great podcast, and so you're in a difficult spot. It is not guaranteed. People say, well, it can't possibly be worse. Yes, it can.
The Lakers have been a revolving door at coach since Phil Jackson. Clearly, it can get worse.
Right. And I'm generally a very optimistic person. My wife always worries that I'm going to leave the house and sell the cow for magic beans. I'm routinely criticized for seeing the good in people and all this other stuff. That said, one of the things I like to point out to people when they say, well, it can't possibly be worse, is it can always be worse. Always. Mm-hmm. And so there's no guarantee that if you fire Darvin, it gets better. So you have to know, I think the postmortem, and tell me if you think this is reasonable. The postmortem is about figuring out what do we do next and making sure that if we fire Darvin, there is a better alternative that we know we can do better out there. And maybe they've come down to the idea that it is better to the alternative, like you say, you know what? We know what Darvin is. We've got 2 years, one which was pretty good and one which was not. We're going to put everybody in the room. We're going to help. We may need a new staff. We're going to figure out what the hell went wrong this year and fix it, because Darvin is still 2 years away from, 2 years ago, he was one of the most well-regarded assistant coaches that universally was believed would be a good head coach. Do we let one bad year ruin that? Or do we try to work through it? Because the alternatives out there are not great. And the thing that scares me the most, side note, you don't have to even answer this, is in McMenamin's piece where he says the Lakers this time would be willing to pay because they wouldn't pay for Ty Lue, and that's why we're here. That makes me worry about big contract for Mark Jackson or big contract for Jeff Van Gundy or someone like that. That's just something I'm putting out there. But you understand what I'm getting. You understand what I'm getting at, the idea that it may be better to try to fix it, because the alternative may not actually be better.
This may sound like Captain Obvious, but I think in the case of the Lakers, it's actually the thing that needs to be asked, because I don't think they've really landed on it ever since Phil Jackson left. Mm-hmm. What do they want in a coach? What do they want? And frankly, how much do they actually care about the coach? How much do they actually think the coach is a big deal? Because I know some of the revolving door that's taken place since Phil was well pre-Rob Pelinka. It was well before Jeannie Buss was ultimately the head shot caller of this organization. But I've never gotten a strong sense since then either that there's been a clear vision of what they want from a coach, a clear vision of how they want to be playing, or clear indications that they think it's that important. We know they care about stars. That is the most important thing to them on a bunch of different levels. This is an organization that, quite frankly, has no idea what to do with themselves if they don't have stars at all times.
Correct.
That's a whole other side conversation in terms of issues that I think it causes the organization, but it's not the one to be having right now. But I think that's the thing they need to be figuring out, regardless of Darvin's fate, regardless of who the replacement would be. What do they want from a coach? What do they think is the importance of the coach? How do we go find somebody who meets that, or how do we mold Darvin into meeting it? Because I have not gotten a sense for over a decade that it's something that they frankly really care about. Since Phil Jackson, who, by the way, was a star in his own right.
Correct. And that's actually the star effery part is where my concern comes with. We're willing to pay for a coach this time, like star coach Mark Jackson is a star coach. He's a name. I don't think he's a great coach, but he's a name. Jeff Van Gundy has a really nice coaching track record. I do not trust people who have not coached in well over a decade or whatever it is. It's too long to be out. I think you're right. And I am at least the more deliberate they are there any other openings right now?
I mean, there's an expectation that Phoenix will be open.
Right. But currently, I don't think as of, Tuesday afternoon when we're recording for Wednesday, Jordy Fernandez is off the market. Brooklyn already filled that hole. And he was one of the most sought after assistants and has been for a couple of years. Right now, they're not competing against anybody for any of these names. I would like them to be deliberate and hopefully have these internal conversations, because I don't believe that Darvin is a tenable option for next year. We've talked about this, but I also don't believe that anything is better than Darvin, that they can't screw this up, or make it worse or whatever, because, there is something to be said. Like, we've swapped coaches out for every 2.5 years for the last decade. It's not a good look, and it's not a good idea. And there's no organizational continuity when that happens. We've preached continuity. We brought back players to have continuity. We should at least explore the potential benefit of trying to fix the problems that were there between the coach and the roster this year before reflexively doing what I think Matt Ishbia is going to do and just can his coach because he's a reactionary,
lunatic.
Good word for it. Billionaires are strange, man. That's just, does something to you.
He's a manhood swinger, and manhood swingers like to often react that way.
I am yet to meet a normal billionaire. There is a process here, and I'm not advocating for it, but I do think there will be an argument that could be made for we surveyed the landscape and we're better off with what we got. They have to do a lot of work to make that work, a lot of rehab, but the postmortem is actually really important. I've come to decide over the last, 48 hours or so, really thinking about what the Lakers should do.
Yeah. I've been saying for a few months now that if Darvin was retained, if they decided for whatever reason that was the best option, they need to get a lot of people in a room together. They need to make some decisions, and it needs to be put on Darvin. These are the decisions that we are making. Mm-hmm. And if you stray from them for reasons that feel arbitrary and are unclear, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on us. And by shame on us, I mean you're fired. Right.
Yeah. So anyway, Locked On, we're getting into the LeBron stuff. We'll obviously keep talking about Darvin until there is some sort of resolution, and depending on what that resolution is, perhaps long after the resolution. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where over 24,000 subscribers are hanging out and wondering what the Lakers are going to do this offseason. Leave us questions, leave us comments. We will be using them liberally throughout the offseason. We will see everyone tomorrow.